Hello and a very warm welcome to you. You're watching Africa News. Here are our headlines. The worst attack yet on UN troops in Mali. At least 9 peacekeepers are killed in the northeast. An Al-Qaeda-linked militia group suspected of being behind the offensive. Men and women pray side by side. Gays are made welcome. South Africa's first open mosque opens its doors despite loud rumbling of disapproval. And as Paris hosts Black Fashion Week, we'll be meeting one of the designers taking part. BONGIWE WALAZA is known for highlighting femininity for all figures. We're going to start in Mali, where at least 9 peacekeepers from the United Nations missions have been killed. The first losses suffered by Niger's 600-strong force, which has been deployed to the country since the start of 2013. Joseph PENNEY in Mali brings us the details.
UN peacekeepers from Niger were on patrol 80 kilometers north of Menaka, which is northeastern Mali, near the Niger border, when they were ambushed by armed men on motorcycles who launched RPGs on them, and they killed at least nine Nigerian peacekeepers, which is the bloodiest attack since the UN began their peacekeeping mission in Mali last year. The jihadists never left. A lot of them were chased out by France. A lot of them sort of laid low in the desert region north of Gao. So they never really left. And now that France has drawn down a lot of its troops in the region, the jihadists are now faced with a lesser enemy, which is the UN peacekeeping forces, which are not as well armed and not as well equipped as the French forces.
Well, France 24's François Rouillet is just back from Gao in northern Mali, where he went on night patrol with a joint French and Malian contingent. France is hoping to fully hand over control of the region to local troops, but while the soldiers are willing, they say they're still lacking a lot of resources and training.
The French base at Gao. It's 7 p.m. An armoured column of Operation BARKHANE moves off towards the water tower. It's a joint patrol with Malian troops.
Colonne 2. 6 éléments à gauche, 3 éléments à droite, derrière mes 3 éléments.
A show of presence directed at the jihadists. They're around on the outskirts of the city. The patrol is also about getting Mali's own armed forces back on the ground.
We are working towards the Malian armed forces being in charge. They need to take the operational lead, so that Barkhane and United Nations peacekeepers are just here to support them. The Malian army needs to be responsible for national security.
The Malian authorities are not fully back. They need to be, so that Operation Barkhane can concentrate on the horizon, on targeting the jihadists' rear bases and transit areas. But local people want them around.
Danger isn't far away. Something bad isn't far off. You have to pay attention to who belongs to the French army and the Malian army. You have to be on your guard.
It's a show of presence in a theatre of fear. The soldiers will be back.
In Libya, the country's second city, Benghazi, is rocked by renewed violence. The army is reporting dozens of deaths among its ranks, saying that fighting broke out between militia groups as they tried to take control of the airport there. 5 new cases every hour, such is the rapid spread of Ebola in Sierra Leone. That's according to data released from the Save the Children NGO. The number of patients vastly outstripping medical supplies, but there was one welcome, as the arrival of 165 doctors and nurses sent from Cuba for 6 months on the ground there. The arrival comes as Britain pledged €150 million worth of aid to fund new community treatment centres in Sierra Leone. Life in prison for a former bodyguard of Rwandan President Paul Kagame. Joel MUTABAZI was sentenced after being found guilty of plotting to kill the president and for being an accomplice in bomb attacks in Kigali last year. He says he will appeal.
Because they cannot consider this trial as a fair trial. It's not fair. I'm a refugee, I was kidnapped. How can you judge someone? They have no evidence for me.
He received bomb threats. Some critics called for his murder, but Dr. Taj Harji was determined to go on and this week opened South Africa's first open mosque. Gay people are welcome, Christians too, and women are treated equally to men. Aisha Ismail has the story.
He's turned an old warehouse into a place of worship for all. Some locals are opposed to Taj Harji's interpretation of Islam. This doctor in theology from Oxford University is dismissive of the local clergy.
We are non-sectarian. We don't Sunnis, we're not Shia, we're not this, we're not that. We do not want to see Al-Qaeda in South Africa, Taliban, or Al-Shabaab, or Boko Haram, or whatever. We want to fight this fanaticism and extremism, which has nothing to do with Islam, nothing to do with the Quran.
He says his faith is based on the Quran and he does not obey any imam. One entrance for men and women praying side by side in the same room.
Where in the Quran says you can't sit legitimately next to someone? Where in the Quran says you can't touch someone just to shake a hand briefly? The niqab, the face mask, it is a pre-Islamic invention. It goes back to Cyrus the Great in Persia, at least 1,500 years before the advent of Islam. But there are also other reasons why we should be against this. This is a fashion statement by fanatics from Saudi Arabia and the Taliban and saying this is what Islam needs or wants.
His Friday prayers have attracted protests from those who believe he's making a mockery of Islam, as there are no barriers in his mosque.
If you were here last week and you heard the uttering of people outside, I must say it didn't give me an aura of feeling safe or peaceful. It was quite violent, you know, and I felt a bit uneasy, but I still came in.
Harji is optimistic his mosque will become one of the most popular places of worship in Cape Town.
Well, her designs are described as individualistic, highlighting femininity for all figures. South African designer BONGIWE WALAZA is in Paris for Black Fashion Week and joins us now in studio. BONGIWE, I hope I'm saying your name properly. Thanks so much for coming in to speak with us. Now, you're here, as I mentioned, for Black Fashion Week, which is a week dedicated to African designers in Paris. Do you not find it weird that it's separate from the other Fashion Week?
At first, when I first heard it, you know, when I got an invitation, it was an excitement that, ooh, Paris Fashion Week, I'm going to do Paris Fashion Week. But then when I read my email again and there's like black, I was like, oh, I'm not sure what this is. So I had to look at it closer. But for me, just a platform in Paris is something when it comes to fashion.
And now your fashion actually has already gone way beyond the border of South Africa and even the continent of Africa, already shown around the world. Are you surprised by this international love of your fashion? Because you do maintain quite a traditional African beat to it.
I am not surprised, but then the fact that I had not reached the so-called fashion capital like Paris, for me, it's something different to showcase in a fashion week in Paris, because most of the places that I showcased in over the world, it was more of a, you know, when a South African embassy in a country would have an initiative and have me showcase South Africa in that country. Yes, I've had some few fashion weeks as well outside South Africa.
Now, what is it about your clothes that makes you so unique? Give us an idea. I've read a lot about a certain material that you use, a certain print. Try and explain to people.
I use isishweshwe. I decided to use something South African or African because when I came to fashion, the very thing that inspired me was my roots. So I was thinking of something that will set me apart, and I found myself very much in love with prints. And this print isishweshwe is South African made, and usually it was used traditionally. So it had these boundaries of tradition that it was only used in homes, rural areas mostly. And then when I came into fashion, I thought of liberating the fabric, taking it off from those boundaries of tradition and take it into special occasions, boardrooms, even weddings, to an extent that now most of my client for Isishwesho is a bride who would like to have a traditional wedding, and it's doing very well. And to my surprise, these designs I've tried to fuse them with your modern, simple looks, and it has attracted a whole lot of international markets.
Okay, I think we're going to sadly have to leave it there, Bongiwе WALAZA, but you can find some of her pictures online, of course, and of course you can look up all the videos of Black Fashion Week here in Paris as well. Thank you so much for coming in to join us, and we hope we can buy some of yours on the Paris streets very soon. That brings us to the end of Africa News.